All right. We are live. This is episode 37 of Tablebreakers, and my name is Bruce. I'm going to introduce Connell, tonight's guest MC, and he'll be bringing on the rest of the panel here just shortly. But I wanted to say it's great to be painting for everybody, and I'll be working on my Frost Giants tonight while the rest of the panel, we discuss our various game theories around our gameology. So, with no further ado, let me introduce Connell, the Cigar DM. Hello, sir. How are you tonight?
Good, and yourself?
I'm doing fan-fucking-tastic. Oh, shit. Damn it. Should I restart the stream? Okay. Well, we're only 43 seconds in. So, hey, Jeebus. We are ready to go, Connell. Let me bring in the other panels as we go ahead, get it started here.
All right, let's barbecue this pig. All right. Well, above me, you see Baron G. Rock. Baron G. Rock is wearing Notre Dame college hat. He is the one waving his head like an idiot, but he will tell you what is what. Next to him is the guy. Ooh, see that nice shamrock? There we go. Now, the guy next to him is Jade. He will be the Q&A person of tonight. He will ask the questions. We'll play a little Rob Robin, and maybe he has a few answers for his own questions. Underneath him is Saint Kai, the man with the rant. What more can I say about that? Then, next to him, on your far, far left bottom, is Shadow. Not with Sun as of yet, but Sun might show up in chat with one or two zingers. And above him is Bruce, who brought us in. You can't get past 30 seconds. With that being said, here we go. Tonight on Table Breaker, I would like to say everybody have a good time watching us. And Jade, do you care to set off the questions?
Sure. So tonight it's about encounter design. And what do I mean by that? Well, encounter design is more than simply throwing monsters at the players and hoping that they don't die. Encounters can run fairly deep, and they don't actually have to be in combat. They can also be roleplay encounters. So the first thing you have to consider when making encounters is, what kind of encounter is it? Is it a roleplay? Is it a combat? Or is it something entirely different, like a puzzle? Then, I would have to say the part 2 question is, when you're designing encounters, what is the purpose of the encounter? Is it a truly random encounter? I don't believe in such things as actual random encounters. I believe that every encounter has a purpose. So, with that being said, I'm going to throw this first to Baron. Baron, when you're setting up encounters, what kind of things do you consider? Or do you set up purely combat encounters? And if you do, what is at risk for the party?
Well, when I'm setting up those encounters, the non-combative ones, I guess is the best way to put it, I'm looking at the people at the table. You know, are they able to do, you know, what's their level of role play? I may not, throw something, considerably out there with someone who's not really ready to fully commit to throwing themselves out there like that. I know there was a lot of talk last night on Gatekeepers with Legion of Myth that they went over that with. But, it's also the fact of, you do have more introverted people. You do have more extroverted people. You've got to have to feel the room when you're doing those. See where you can go and how to pull them in. And that's the next thing is especially the story aspect. How does it forward the story? Yes, I said story. Everyone, grab your drinks, and we shall drink. But how is it going to further the story? How are you going to get from point A to point B with whatever you put in there? Is it going to be a purely, hack and slash? Are there going to be puzzles they're going to have to figure out? Are they going to have to save, one of the old tropes, go and slay a dragon or save a damsel in distress? what is going to further the story? And that's the biggest thing when you're building these encounters is you have to figure out how the story is going to play out before the encounter, during the encounter, and after the encounter. Because, most, like myself, I run a lot of stuff off the top of my head. But at the beginning of the night, I have a few plot points that I've, just kind of scribbled down. It's a, if you want to think about it, it's a loose roadmap in order to get from point A to point B for that night. And however the party and I get there, that's how we get there. That's how I run. It's more of a free form type thing. I do everything theater of the mind. I don't throw the minis on the board, so I do it slightly different. The big thing is that when you're also looking at the other side, the hack and slash, what is up for them to lose? Are you just having them kill monsters, or are you having them kill somebody or a NPC or a big bad for a reason? Or is the person that they're going to be going up against going to be the big bad? And it's going to be that reoccurring character that's just going to be the bane of their existence until finally they're able to slide the knife into the gut and say, "You're dead." Those are the types of things that I look at especially when I'm coming up with the encounter. Is my biggest thing is how am I going to chain these encounters in order to make it work? And make it work with the story that I want to tell, and also make it work for the players being able to live the story that we're telling.
Okay. So, to the cigar GM, what kind of encounters do you typically build? Do you build the combats? Do you build the role play? Do you attempt puzzles?
It depends on where they're at. If I'm doing a homebrew, I'm going to leave modules out of it because that's not encounter building. That's encounter adaptiveness. Maybe you might need to shift things around, but it's not really building. It's everything's there. You just need to learn, figure out how it's going to work. But when I build the encounter, it's the what, when, how, and where. Why are they there? Who is there, and the main questions of life. So then with 5e, I also have to play a little bit of a number game because there's the mechanics of 5e says if you throw 10 goblins at 5 players who have multi-attack, they can kill the players. They can outdo the players in damage. So I need to okay, if I can't throw 10, maybe can I throw 7 and keep it a decent encounter for the players, so they're invested in the game as in, oh crap, we might actually not do well. Then once I get those numbers worked out, I work in, okay, where's the brass ring? Are they here to save the princess, as Baron said? Are they here for a magical item? Are they here because the mayor of the town has paid you, because it's still low level, to go take care of this because he's tired of the farmers bitching about them losing cows? So I put all those things together and I kind of do a little math in my head, and that's how I run. That's how I do my encounters. There's no randomness about it. I do know what I'm going to be throwing at them. It's just the number game. How many of what? Then do I give them the brass ring now, or do I make them work for it? Do they, do I add an extra 0 to hit points like Shadow has said in the past if they're doing amazingly well, better than I expect them to do, and I don't want them to get their egos too big right out the gate? Or maybe I want to, so I can deflate it later. But that's how I do my encounter building, at least for earlier levels, I should say.
Okay. So, Kai, same question. What encounters do you prefer to throw at your players?
I would prefer normally to throw social, but I'll be honest, I will throw a wide variety at them. I know I've said in the past I hate random encounters because random encounters equal to random damage equals random death. I also had a thing of I would prefer social encounters, but every once in a while, it really does depend on my players. If they steer towards combat, combat it shall be, and I'm not going to be like, oh, I can't. So I've just learned to adapt and create an encounter. I don't plan my encounters because my players have proven to me over years and years that whatever I plan will be ignored. So adapt, improvise, and succeed. There you go. That's how it really comes down to.
Okay. Shadow, what encounters do you typically throw and why?
Well, it kind of, for me, it's kind of formulaic, but it's really basic. If they're outdoors, it's usually some sort of creature. Now, it can be monsters or humanoids or aliens or but it's usually something that's going to be a fight or flight. Unless they're on like a road, in which case it'll usually be either bandit, highwaymen, or fellow traveler. In which case it can be a social. If it's in a city or a town or anything civilized, it's going to be like I said, social encounters, where they can get clues and information, make contact, bump into a lady of the evening and schedule an appointment for later, any number of things like that. But if it's in a dungeon or a fortified location they're sneaking in or anything like that, it's combat. In anything that's dungeon-esque, there's only a 1 in 10 chance that there's going to be that, maybe a jail cell with people they can break out that might be helpful, or some sort of prisoner or something like that. Otherwise, everything is probably going to be hostile. It's not, it's not just the D&D like first and second edition mindset. I use it for all my sci-fi games, all my superhero games. It really doesn't matter. If it's outdoors, it's probably going to be a critter. If it's in a city, it's probably going to be a person, and the sky's the limit. In which direction it can go. It really depends on what kind of characters meet what kind of people. To make it interesting. And if it's in a hostile location, a dungeon, a cavern, some sort of military base, or something that they have to sneak into a warehouse, it's basically combat. Now, all of those could be mixed up a little, but that's just to throw off the otherwise seemingly just set pattern. Knock in a door, beat up the monster, clear the room, knock down the next door. I'll break it up, but for the most part, those 3 areas have pretty much a 90% chance of always having the same kind of encounter. What it is exactly, that also depends on, if it's a forest, well, they're going to bump into forest creatures. If it's a desert, it's probably going to be a giant scorpion. That's pretty much how I do it.
Awesome. Bruce, anything to add to this?
I really don't have much to add. I mean, I have 4 really educated individuals that gave good answers, and I kind of agree with what Blaine said. The random encounters mean random casualties, and I kind of agree with that. Now, I want people to be able to recover from things. I want to be able to have the party be able to repair themselves and stop for a day or two, get some extra healing, maybe just sit the stream for a few days and try to relax, get the horses out of a lame status so they can proceed on their multi-100-mile hike. But I honestly feel that encounter design, from my perspective, it all starts with how many people am I looking at the table? And I have to build off there. I might have a recommendation from a module saying you need 4 individuals of the same challenge rating level as the player characters. And I'm thinking, no, I've got this guy playing a Magus. I have Rebecca playing a character that she doesn't know how to optimize well. So for the Magus, I have to throw in that. So it kind of averages out a bit. And then if I have it start at great range, the party will be at a severe disadvantage. And so they're going to be tapping their cleric really hard. Ronaldo's going to probably be out of any sort of healing he can provide by the end of the day if they continue falling back, shooting arrows, falling back, shooting arrows, peppering the party the whole time. Ronaldo's going to get tapped before noon. My encounter design, really, I have to look at it, and as much as I would like to say there's a formula to it, I actually have to judge it by what player characters are at the table by who. I really have to go with that mindset, and if I can't ascertain numbers, I have to throw out a small, almost a comically challenging encounter to where you have 6 5th level characters, 6 of them, and they encounter a group of like 8 kobolds with no class, just D4 hit points and spears, and just to see how fast they can wipe these out, so I can get an idea. Something that they can wipe out within 12 seconds of real time, not game time. I need to be able to see how quick this combat goes with them. And so my encounter design completely is based on what is the party doing at the time, and I will orchestrate story around that. I think that's my best answer I can give you.
Yeah. Well, no matter what the encounter is, be it combat, role-play, puzzle, there has to be some underlying reason or risk. What is at risk for not participating in the encounter? What do the PCs risk losing, or what consequences might befall them if they choose not to get involved? Now, for most role-play encounters, it might be some key or crucial information that if they're not willing to role-play, they will have a harder time of it, and they'll take a harder route. In combat scenarios, if they don't want to get involved, well, I guess they flee. But with puzzles, sometimes it comes down to a skill roll if the people just aren't feeling it that night. There should always be a way to get around the encounter, no matter what it might be. So I'm going to dive a little into the 3 T's of encounters. Now, I'm pulling most of this information from Index Card RPG. It's the system that I'm kind of going towards as I'm going away from D&D and Pathfinder. But it has some really good things in here. The 3 T's refer to timer, threat, and treat. So when setting up an encounter, you need to be aware of the amount of time it should be taking the PCs to complete it. There should be some kind of event or thing that happens at a certain specific time if the PCs don't act, or if they do act and they're just not fast enough, something might happen. It could be a good thing, it could be a bad thing. Oftentimes it's a bad thing because that is what gets players motivated. So to use timers, you can do all sorts of things. You can roll dice. You can say specifically at this many turns something happens. Do any of you have experience with putting timed events into your role-play games or encounters? And if you do, please expand upon the method or give me your theory or design behind it. I'm going to start with Baron again.
Poor guy.
Okay, try that one more time.
So, during encounter design,
Yeah.
it is often used a timed event. Like, X will happen if you do not stop it. You ever run these types of encounters? And if you do, can you give examples?
I don't run the timeline type stuff of where things, if they don't get hit apart, then it doesn't, other things happen. I've yet to run that type. Not saying that I won't run that type later, but yeah.
Okay, no,
So-
and that's perfectly fine. So some of these concepts are even new to me. I never used to use timers at my table. DM Connell, do you have anything to add about timers?
I've actually used timers in the most recent history. I've used timers twice. It was timers that they were fighting a group of, what were they, orcs? Yeah, no, ogres. Ogres. They were fighting ogres, and I gave it 2 minutes before the next wave came in. Then another 2 minutes. Then the next wave came in, and there was 4 waves. So that's how I broke up. That's how I did the timer aspect in my for that campaign.
Okay, follow-up question then. Did your players react to that timer?
Yeah, they were not happy.
But did they have fun?
They had fun. Their main bitch actually was the timer, because the timer was a real world issue that had nothing to do with their fantasy rope.
Okay.
Yes,
I see
we
the
have
disconnect.
we have to watch the clock to know how much time we have left in the game. We don't need you to bring out a not eight timer, but I use my phone. But yeah, they did not like the extra meta, extra outside influence that's not already in the game.
Okay. Kai, you look like you're getting wound up there. What you got?
Oh my gosh, yes. See, I don't have to put timers on my plans because my players will create plans that have timers for me, where they know that I understand things like, all right, at their movement rate, they'll be here in 2 minutes. You have a 2-minute window. Act within that window. They'll plan around that window. They'll plan on how long the alarm, when the alarm does inevitably sound because somebody's going to, trip it up. How long the first wave of guards are going to take to wake up, get moving, and get to their position. They all know this. They're working on these. How long do we have to kill somebody? How long do we have to knock a door down? How long will they will overly plan this out and then work it out ahead of time, and that gives me the option of going, okay, they've given themselves an extra minute or two, so I gotta slow them down for 10 rounds to fuck up their plan. I can throw complications into them that will make everything go to hell. I want them, they set their timers for them, and then they try to beat their own goals. And my job is to throw at that point, I'm not the one going, well, you have 10 rounds before the bad guys show up. No, I've already given them an idea. They've got their plans, and then I go, your plan was off by a few minutes. You didn't count on somebody who was near, just not paying, someone in the area, and I get to, it's great. I love the idea of timers because, especially, I'll put them in, my players will put them in, and it's great because we actually have a good enough grasp on how the world actually works that we can plan around it and make that little bit of more visceral feeling. So it's like if you go blow up that camp at 2 a.m, the orcs aren't just going to spring up into full combat gear. No, it's 2 a.m. Their brains are going, nah, I don't feel like I'm fighting right now. I'm sleeping. What the hell's going? Who's fucking yelling? And you got a few more rounds. Then we murder them down at sunset, whatever. And shit actually happens. My players think about this, I think about this, and thus or at least my veteran players think about this, and my new players get to have a crash course in. It's a book to play by and learn the book, and they get to figure it out, and then they can start figuring out how to pick up on this timer thing, and it's a lot of fun.
Okay. Beto, do you have experience running with limited time events?
Absolutely. Although, admittedly, it's usually more often with like sci-fi games, horror games, superhero games, or modern day spy games. It the whole concept of time in a medieval fantasy setting is, kind of iffy. I was talking to Bloodworth about it the other day. Do we actually have hourglasses to figure out, how we're going to figure 3 hour shift for night watch? Who's doing their 3 hours in the next 3 hours? And he said, "Oh yeah, watch the stars." And I'm like, "What? Okay." Yeah, I mean, I can do it during the day. I know the trick with the fingers, to tell time and the stick in the sand. That's well and fine. But at nighttime, what if there's no stars? We all have like we carry around a big hourglass just for 3 hour watches. But with a sci-fi game or like a top secret or James Bond game where you got to get in, you got to get out real quick, or you got to avoid the robot that's coming around every 5 minutes. Those kinds of games, for me, it seems to work a lot better to let them know you're on a literal timer, and you don't even have to hide it from them. You can tell, okay, you guys got X number of turns or rounds or whatever the game mechanic is, or I'm going to give you 10 minutes to come up with a plan because so yeah. And I have used it in fantasy situations where you're trying to sneak in somewhere or trying to rescue somebody quick because there's guards moving around. But for the most part, it time like Max and I believe Kai talked about, where it's a much longer increment of time. It's a year or 6 months or 10 years or something longer, where if this doesn't happen by this point, then shit's gonna hit the fan. Otherwise, it just seems completely, for me, out of place.
Okay. Bruce.
Timers. we discussed timer dice. One of these guys, a couple of these guys talked about that. Max is talking about that in the comments. I've used timers in my story and narrative design before. Not really so much in combat, because in combat there's already enough things that the players are fighting, like death. And I've put things out there for the narrative, like, you guys have 3 weeks to get rid of this person in town. If you don't get rid of this person in town before the blessed event, be it the solstice or the festival or the whatever it may be, more people like this, more elements like this will pop up into the location. And if you think it's rough now with getting a knife in the ribs on your leisurely stroll home from the bodega, if you think that's an inconvenience, just wait until it happens to you daily. And I just kind of leave it at that. I break narrative, or I break the fourth wall by telling them, here's how long you have, here's your target, here's exactly the victory conditions that you have to do. And I guess you'd say that even though I'm running a story game, I break the fourth wall to shovel it in my players' faces with game terms so they can understand. But I don't want them to misunderstand me. Not all of us are at the table. Not all of us are in an environment where we can have a shut door and absolute quiet. Some of us have cats knocking stuff over. We have kids running in the room. So I have to tell people things in a way that it breaks the narrative of the story, or the fluidity, by Bruce saying, you have 4 days, and if you do not get this goal accomplished, may fear and mirror and kill have mercy upon your soul. And I give it to him like that. And I guess you would say that happened with the Slumbering Czar saga 2 years ago, and the party failed, and therefore the town got took over by a rival group Their entire economic system in town collapsed as this renegade faction came in and usurped everything and took control of the gold trade, ruining the player's ability to craft because they were running out the clock trying to beat this dungeon. And well, we just need like another 74 days to craft all these items. Okay, I'm not going to let you sit on your ass and craft for 74 days. And I kind of shoveled that onto them. And then they failed that, and then they kept failing, and then they table flipped. Okay, fine, you table flipped. And that was the game over.
Okay. So, oftentimes timers can act as a suspense element. Now, these are my thoughts on it. So I might use a timer event to say, I don't know, and I'll prelude to this as well. The players are feeling tremors as they enter the unstable grounds of Zur. And from that, they can understand that earthquakes are happening, and they might, have a building collapse on them, or they might start losing terrain. As a matter of fact, this did happen in one of my recent games, where the players did lose terrain as rounds went by. Every second round, more terrain would drop away into the abyss. This kind of ratcheted up the suspense for those who could not fly during that time period. So timers can really get your players motivated to get things moving faster, or to get them to obtain their goal quicker, or really hyper focus them. The next two elements of the 3 T's is threats and treats. Now, these are kind of two sides of the same coin to a certain extent. So the threat of a encounter is the big monsters, or the minions, or whatever you might be fighting or having to contend with. It might be the king who's out to get you, or out to put you in a position to where you fuck up something, and he gets to lock you in prison or put you in the gallows. But there should always be treats to the threats, especially if they're more dangerous threats. The treat is some kind of key thing that will allow the players to maneuver in such a way to succeed at the encounter. It should never be painted into a corner unless they purposely ignore all the potential treats or all the potential elements that will help them succeed. If they want to just bash their face against the brick wall till either their face gives in or the wall crumbles, that's on them. But there might be a weak spot in the wall that they could throw themselves against. So, threats and treats. I'm going to go reverse order this time, starting with the Bruce.
Threats. Well, whenever I have a campaign set up, I try to have my players given, and I try to make it as abundantly clear to them as to what the narrative is at this moment. I do run a very visual game with figurines, grids, and I will sometimes position figurines on the table and just let the players see the potential thing they might have to fight on the mat. And sometimes that's just enough to give them the fear of God. Like last session, my druid and the party archer, wizard, arcane archer took to the skies, and they were flying over enemy territory to see if they could spy on what's going on. Because he's done this before, but at a low altitude, the giants can propel trees at them through their modified bow and arrows and crossbows. So that can't really work too well. And so up goes the archer and the druid flapping through the night. And I just put on camera this big gargantuan red dragon and had that flapping in behind them. He didn't try to, close the gap. He didn't try to toy with them too much. He was just kind of seeing, what's this? Of course, he's probably using like detect magic and other stuff. The players don't know that. The players just see a big friggin' red dragon flapping behind them. And I almost had the players quit in the middle of the night, in the middle of the day. We're done. We can't beat this campaign. You've got a goddamn dragon here. I was just trying to show them what sort of things are there. And I didn't give them a small dragon. I had a camera set up, and I kind of put this dragon like right up on it, like, hey, look. And Greg, the guy that painted that dragon, he's like the entire time drooling, oh, that thing looks so good. That thing looks so good. I love this dragon. Yeah, Connell's got the original Colossal Dragon. But it is a very good thing to just have from my perspective as a GM. You don't even need to say anything when your game has visual elements like this, where you can just put a couple figures on the table and the players can see that up to the side on the camera, or if they're there in person, they just see these figures that are there. What are those? What's that? What's going on? And you can hear their butthole pucker. And as a dungeon master, that's the result you really do want to have. You don't have to tell them what it is. You're not obligated to give them any information. All you have to do is just put something on the table and make them wonder. That's the main reason why I haven't put away any of the giant and ogre figs since April. Because I've got, if you look on the far side of the table where I've got the game running, you have that big die tower, the dragon or the D&D icon, and then you have a bunch of little figs behind it. Well, they're not really little; they're like 2.5 inches tall, almost the size of your Kenner Star Wars figures from 1979. And they're a bunch of giants. And the players see that when the camera pans up occasionally, and I can hear Chris kind of be like, "Oh God," and I want that. So as a dungeon master, there's a bit of a joy that you get from just, you don't have to put it on the battle mat. You don't have to say, this is the guy here. Just put it off to the side. Let them see it. And let them know, like, hey, this could be a potential encounter for you later on. And just let them play with that in their head for a bit. Some of them won't care. Some of them are going to be like, Bruce, you have over 30,000 figurines, painted or not, in your abode. I don't care what you have on screen. And other people take it really personal. And we're like, he's got them on the table. He's going to use all those on us. We're the only game he's got. And they really get scared. They are worried about their treasured 7th level elf ranger. They're going to lose it. It's the furthest they've ever gotten in a game. And that is the type of reaction that I thrive off of, because I do want them to be scared for their character's existence.
But do you ever offer treats or potential outlets or avenues that they can use to their advantage? The treats, so to say, to the encounter?
All the time. My players right now have a subsystem that they're not using called the Kingmaker system, and they've elected to kind of just gloss over it, do the quick and dirty, not get too immersed in the die rolling and the 2 hours of stuff you have to do for every game month, because you have a set of rolls to see if you have order, if you have unrest, if you have people that are doing well, if they have a random encounter at one of the outposts. Yeah, things like that could happen, and the players aren't taking advantage of it. But if they did, if they had somebody that was skilled at it, that was in there, they would get some extra toys to play with. They would get extra resources to delve into. They would have those things not at their fingertips, but they could say, in a week, I need this catapult over at Kundrakar. In 10 days, I need to have these 2 magical swords made for this outpost over here. And they would be able to actually get their hands on more stuff. But the players neglect that because they're kind of not wanting to get too involved with that. They've been scared by other aspects of my game, which are very, crunchy and note taking. You do have to have your ducks in a row. That's how Pathfinder is set up. Know your character. Don't play your character sheet, but know your character. That way, when I ask you, what are you doing? You can respond to me. You don't have to respond to me in character. You can say, well, Thomas is going to blah, blah, blah. Okay. And there's other things that are out there that I offer them as treats. And all the players have to do is just hex crawl there. Now, hex crawling takes time to get from one side of the map to the other. But once you do, you sometimes open up other resources or other avenues of things, or maybe you open up, for my campaign, you open up new classes or new races, new combinations for player character choices. And everybody seems to have a hard-on for that. And that's fine. I give those things out because I want the players to discover what's around them, and there are strategic reasons why those things are in the world. There are reasons why those specific things are there, and I want the players to discover them. If they don't have the time to delve and to hex crawl, okay, that's fine. You are in the middle of an invasion right now, and your community is being besieged from two different directions on the map by two different forces, one of which is very tactical and cunning, filled with guile and rage, and the other one is just brute strength, and it will smash you with a club or a very large rock.
Okay. Shadow.
Really quick.
And treats. Oh, okay.
Really
Yeah,
quick.
let Tom go before you forget.
I kind of want to jump, say something really quick, then go back to Kai. But only if we had a person who had Saturdays off, who loves to be a note taker, who wants to be not the cleric in the sense of wibbity bibbity bobbity boo, but the cleric as ooh, look, there are pieces of paper with notes on it that has details and things like that. Where could we find a person who would be willing, who would be wanting to do that? That's all I have to say.
Okay.
So
I will be your goddamn fucking seneschal, but I demand to have an entire staff. I require people who are in charge of intelligence, personnel, operations, logistics, plans, and communications. I will run your goddamn country for you, and by God, I will be in a fucking carriage, armored, and it will drive around like a fucking maniac, and then you will see me show up for 5 minutes, yell at you, throw paperwork at you, say, sign it, motherfucker, get a clipboard, disappear again for another month. You will not see me, and when you come back, I will have a kingdom for you, and I'll just go, you're a very good officer, here's your biscuit, now get the fuck out of the way so the real people can do their work. Go. Is that what you want?
Okay. So,
okay, Jay,
I'm gonna get over to Shadow. Yes.
Hold that cup up for a second. Okay, turn it. When you're holding it a certain way, by your shirt, it's like you've got a half a cup, and you're defying gravity and physics.
I see that. Yes.
Okay.
Teacup.
So basically, a lot of my answers are going to be like this. It depends on the situation.
Absolutely.
The threat depends on, like I said before, it all kinds of ties together. If they're in a city, the threat is everyone around them. All it takes is one person to ring that alarm, and suddenly you've got the most terrifying creatures you will ever encounter in one of my games, and that's the town guard. Because maybe you can kill them, but that's just going to bring more, and then the wizard and the knight. Are you trying to get the king's attention and his wizard? Because that's how that happens. You screw up in town, or you just end up in the hoosegow, and chances are you literally won't actually be able to escape. Chances are you will do your time, or large, horrible amounts of time in jail, like a year. I've done that to people. Okay, you get your first opportunity to escape. 2 years later. And they were like, you're kidding. And I'm like, no. 2 years go by, and you finally have an opportunity to escape. Are you going to take it? Just know that if you fail, you will die. They will march your ass up to the gallows or whatever form of execution they have, and they will end you. And you don't have any of your magic items. You don't have any memorized spells. So be careful in town. If you're in the woods, you got to also understand from my experiences in the beginning of gaming, Dungeons and Dragons rewarded you for avoiding those monsters that you could not actually defeat. If you bypassed the trolls like in The Hobbit and you never got caught and you never did combat and you just snuck past them, you'd get the experience points for killing them, even though you didn't, because you found a way around it. Just like if you found treasure in a locked chest and it was trapped, you would get all the XP for the magic items and the treasure that was in that box, even though nobody took any damage because the thief disarmed the trap, picked the lock, and you snuck off with the treasure that was at the top of the tower, and you didn't get caught, and you'd get a crap ton of XP, for your level and for the items and for the gold. So, outdoor encounters, my players are more often likely to avoid the obvious, dragons and monsters they can't kill. Just because if they do so and manage to, tell the tale, they're going to get a chunk of XP. In the dungeons, that's different. Chances are, it's probably going to be a dungeon cleaning endeavor where you pretty much have to kill, defeat, or tie up everything you come across. Otherwise, it's just going to bite you in the ass later on down the road. And as for the treats, every encounter should have something. It doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be magic items. But, a clue, making a friend, making a contact, making it even just an acquaintance later on down the road, that could be helpful. So, there should be something for everything. Sometimes, though, that treat can actually be a bad thing because if you make an enemy, but you make an enemy because, like basic, simple concepts like good versus evil. You bump into the anti-paladin strolling down the street, and now every time he sees you, he's going to remember that he hates you, and he may do things later on down the road. You forgot about him, but he's still like wringing his hands all pissed off because you stepped on his new Nikes or something, and he'll send his minions out out of nowhere just because you irritated him that one time. But that's, in the long run, that's a bonus, because now that he is in fact an anti-paladin, not just some bloke who likes to dressed in black armor with gold trim and skulls all over the place. He's not just a poser. He's a big bad guy that you need to deal with, and the sooner you get on with it, the simpler your life will be.
Kai, threats and treats. You often balance the two.
Very much so. I actually enjoy, and the threats everyone kind of already, if you haven't picked up my doctrine on threats over the last 30-some episodes, I'm sorry. But treats are always actually what I entice people with to get them to come out most of the time. That's right. Always, most of the time. That's right. Wrong. But no, the treats are usually what gets you, what gets them motivated. It's like, giving them that nice little out, or the choice. It's oh God, best way to put it is just simply. I mean, if they're creative, you give them something. Give them something nice. Give them the reward for being creative. If they're looking for that, some miracle, occasionally give them that. The arrival of the cavalry over the hill, or some an unexpected aid, or that person that they decided to save, well, they were somebody actually important. If they decide to go a little bit above, give them something nice for it. It doesn't always have to be here's a shiny trinket, though. Sometimes that's a good enough motivation where it's like where someone goes, I want that shiny thing. They're going to go after the shiny thing. Boy, God, are they going after that shiny thing? And yeah, honestly, I give them a good variety of toys to play. Goals, motivations, but usually they set their own goals, and well, hell, whatever I give them is just bonus, and they'll actually almost kind of usually forget whatever bonus little treat I give them, and then I haven't forgotten them. I gave it to them, and then 2, 3, 4 sessions on the road, it's like 2 more encounters on the road. Oh, you remember that thing I gave you? Oh shit, yeah, I do. You might want to use that now. Or though occasionally a player might go, I'm going to use it now. You were supposed to save that. No. I'm going to fire it off now. But you need that. No. I want to blow up that goblin with the artillery piece now. You only get one shot. I know. But I don't want I hate him. You don't even know him. I don't like his color. He's green. I don't like green. Explosions. Bye. Red mist. I'm like, you're going to pay for it later down the road. You know that, right? Yeah, but it was a pre-red mist. Good for you.
Oh, murder hobos.
Was that?
Oh, murder hobos.
You know what? Occasionally, it's kind of fun watching a player, turn a orc who's running away very, very quickly into a shish kebab sticking out of a redwood tree with with a ballista bolt through his chest. You're like, that's a pretty. You know what? You might have needed that ammo later, but go ahead, fire. Go ahead. I only gave you 5 shots, and you used up 4 of them. But fuck it, why not? Why not fire that last one off? That way, I can pay him back later and go. That dragon needs to get shot down now. You know that, right? Ah, shit. Yeah, we could have used the big gun to kill the big bad, didn't we? Yeah, that's kind of why I gave it to you. But that orc did need to die. I know. It's okay, buddy. I understand. But anyway, yeah, you give them nice little treats and then they have fun. It's good.
Cigar GM.
I just realized I have to be careful what I say because one of my friends just posted on Messenger that he looks forward to watching this later on, and he's in one of my campaigns. So with that being said, forgive me if I curse on my answers.
Well, I know you run modules.
Yeah.
Do any of your modules that they have already completed have these treats built into them? And have you ever seen them actually truly use them?
Yes, actually,
you put treats in place.
I put treats in them. In the first module, Rise of the Moon Lord, you get to know a bartender who ends up leaving the town to go and search for his brother. Well, they were just RPing, and I kind of like set in character. The lady's like, "Would any of you guys be interested in buying my bar?" Like, yeah. Well, we'll buy your tavern and we'll use it as a minor income. And they bought it and they fixed it up. Then they get to Magmar and they end up buying Foxglove's Summer Manor and turn that into something as making a deal with the other dwarves in town where they're making a little bit more income in another way. So yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, but my treats tend to be real estate and yeah, I know it is what it is, but the players seem to like it, and I found a way for that to work for treats. And for threats, I have going back to the modules, I have these books. Each one of them has a rune on it for each sin. They found 3 out of the 7, And if you put all these books together, you get leaving that alone until they finish the campaign for the bastards watching this later on. But there are threats that they might not see up front that are going to be getting them in the back. To get them in the back end. And that's just adding on to a module. I know there's a lot of people out there who says, well, you need to run the module as written. Well, if that's the case, there's a lot of modules out there just should not be ran. And so adding some flavor to it and taking out some dumbassery, I think makes for a better game.
I gotta add something on there. Right now, I'm running a module. In fact, I've ran modules for the past 4 years with some changes here and there, but I usually will vary the encounter difficulty to match the table because, well, there's the majority of people for 3rd edition will run with 4 players. I don't. I run with 6 or 8 typically, and I prefer to run with 8. With 8 players, you do have a lot of focusing as a DM to keep them on task, keep them in their current predicament, and don't let them get fat. Don't let them get rich. Don't let them strike it big. Let them always struggle. Kai's over there. He's crying right now when he hears this. But you, as a DM, you want to keep their resources stressed. You don't want to let them just accumulate and then let interest work in their favor. Don't do that. Unless you're going to focus them on a big purchase later, which real estate's the name of the game, then okay. But I recommend that when you're running a module, first off, read the module first, because there's too many DMs that don't read a module. And secondly, adjust the challenge to match your table. Don't blindly run the module thinking it'll be okay. And if you do run the module thinking it will be okay, fudge your dice out of your player's perspective. Do not let them see it. Do not let them perceive it. Do not let them see your tells. You run the game as honestly as you can, and I prefer you run it with as much blood as possible. That way the players do see that there's a cost for going into things half-cocked. So I'm just saying that. Go ahead.
Well, I should add on. I do the big no, which seems to have a lot of DMs have issues with. I add magic shops in my campaign, but the magic shops are in metropolis-sized cities. They're not in your small town thorps. Or you have to go to like a big-sized city, and
that's a creation of the 3rd edition invasion. When they came out with 3rd edition, you would have only certain size towns would have these magic items available. You'll never have a low-level artifact in a town with less than 100,000 people. Unless you have a story reason for the players to be in said town, they should always try to do their work in a big city, which I really disagree with. I think you should design your world as you see fit. You don't have to build it as per their design. The people at WotC, the people at Paizo are not world crafters of a great, respectable talent, in my opinion. I trust third parties far more than them. I would trust Kai to build a world for me much better. Kai would have individual cathedrals and temples set up in the wilderness, so the pilgrims would actually have a place to go after their long hike, and they could have a hot cocoa. Or go ahead, Kai.
You are muted, sir.
You're not wrong. You're definitely not wrong about that. I wish I had the map that I could show you of a region that has a holy pilgrimage route on it that actually has way stations and temples set up along at individual points based on how far people can walk in a day, and that these are the actual and using a Kingmaker map, it's about 2 hexes on a road each day, and so therefore there's some wilderness, but as long as you stay on the road, you're safe. But realize that once you go off into the tall grass, you're fucked.
Yes.
really fucked.
And I didn't mean to interrupt, Mike, but I felt that was important enough for me to do so.
Sure, not a problem. So, Baron, threats and treats, the two side, the one coin with the two sides. Do you ever plant treats for your players to find during encounters that might help them along the way?
Only during October, because I make them, sometimes they have to do a trick for the treat, but I mean, still. Anyway, no, sometimes I will do that. Sometimes, I will, have them rely on, sometimes their skills. And sometimes your skills make them fall into a 40-foot well and die. It happens. And the thing is that I am never out to kill the player, but if the players wind up killing themselves, that just makes me even happier. Just for the simple fact of I didn't do it, you did it with your dice rolls. I'm absolved, but no. And that's really with the threats thing. I tend to keep it. Sometimes I'll throw stuff at them that's way above their pay grade, and just because I want to see if they're smart enough to run. Because the thing is that I want to put them in the mindset that, and I don't do it right off. I usually wait until probably that sweet spot about 4th or 5th level where a lot of them are really getting their really cool stuff, in terms with Pathfinder. And then that's when I'll drop something on them that I know that would just wipe the floor with them, because I want them to have the cool powers, but also understand the limitation of those cool powers. That they're not absolutely going to run over everything that I put out for them. Treats typically I don't look at until I let the story run. Sometimes I will go I'll plot out some things ahead. You typically, once they hit that 4th, 5th level, once they hit that sweet spot where they start getting their really cool shit, and really that allows them to, and that actually opens them up to other items. Now, there have been times where I have put in things like an heirloom item or what I would call a growth item. So it will scale based on either a stat or something along those lines, which kind of I've had mixed results with it, because I've had some players be like, "Wow, you railroad me into putting when I get my bumps into this." And I go, "It's only going to help you. I mean, you can always swap out weapons, but you're not going to get as cool effects and damage with other weapons as you're going to get with that without spending a hell of a lot of gold." And, I mean, if you feel that way, you can definitely, retire it. That's no problem. You can always pull it back out, but it's still always going to scale off that. Now, and like I'll have a bow and it'll scale off of depth. I'll have a fighter, which their weapon will scale off of their strength. I'll have maybe some sort of, for a wizard, some kind of trinket that will scale off of their either wisdom or charisma, whichever they wish, whether they're cleric or arcane, or even paladin. So, I mean, that's the big thing, is that because, it kind of rolls back to the heirloom item is, well, I'm not going to just drop this in 2 levels. This weapon that I'm playing, this is going to be a growth weapon a weapon that is going to scale with you if you take care of it and you learn how to scale. Those are kind of the only kind of little treats. And usually what I'll do is they will, if they do wind up having a growth item, they'll get -1 on every level of hit points as a payment for the entirety of the campaign as a payment for it. You think about 20 hit points in regards for a growth item is pretty cheap, but if you look at lower levels, that 1 hit point can mean life or death. So it allows them to make that choice how they want to go. And that's typically my take on it.
Okay. So, as far as threats and treats, I do gauge the power of my threats against my players. If my players have 5 milestone abilities, between each of them, I'm going to throw threats that are commensurate to their power level. If in D&D 3.0, I'm going to look at what their character level is, the average of it, and throw CR, challenge rating, monsters that fill up or meet their CR value or their effective level value. So that is something to look at. Is make sure you're looking at your players' power or their capabilities. From that, you can also plan over their capabilities. You can plan threats that are exceedingly dangerous for them to get into. Now, it can be a combat threat, it can be a encounter threat, it can be a puzzle threat. Like if you don't solve this puzzle in 4 rounds, the boulders come crashing down on you. But there should also be the treat. The treat for me is there's something in the room, something in the encounter space that is there to help them out. So, in the case of a puzzle where the boulders are going to come crashing down, all they see a triangle, a circle, and a square. And that there is the treat. Like, okay, what are we looking for? And there might be a stick that is exactly half of the circle's diameter. Well, that's the radius. All I have to do is, pi radius. That might be the solution to that puzzle. You might also run into a situation where, you're fighting a big red dragon in a cavern. But unbeknownst to the dragon, the boulders above it look unstable, and one well-placed arrow shot might bring the cavern down on top of the dragon. These are the treats that I would offer players as a means of helping them in the encounter, especially if it's an encounter that I designed to be far above their capabilities to begin with. But it makes it that much more epic when the players discover these things. It might also get them to start role-playing and looking around and trying to inspect their environment. Like, if they're just trying to brute force their way through every single encounter, that's how you make murder hobos. They're just there to brute force their way. If you start putting in early on the treats in every encounter space, they're going to start looking for those things. They're going to start trying to figure out what is here to help me. What can I use in this room to help me? They'll think outside the box, and they won't rely strictly on powers, abilities, or magic items to get them through the day. So that is how I like to use threats and treats. I do like to challenge my players pretty harshly at times. I used to say that I design every encounter to kill at least half the party. I still kind of do, but I'm also putting in a treat there so that they can find a way to get out of it. So, we've talked about timers, we've talked about threats, we've talked about treats. There are ways that we can tune or dial these things in during encounters or even before encounters even happen. These dials that we can turn as the game masters are damage, disruption, and duration. These 3 dials are kind of our weapons or tools at the table to play with. Damage is pretty self-explanatory. The demons have been swinging all night, but they can't seem to land a meaningful blow. okay, well, they might just pick up that sword, smash it against the ground, make it a jagged weapon, and suddenly their weapon's doing, instead of a d6, 2d6, because it's leaving horrific wounds. Or instead of upping the damage, when they do finally hit, they're hitting and doing bleed damage or consistent damage over time. So these are, some of the tools that we can, use at the table. You guys ever have experience with upping the damage mid-fight to make it more dangerous? Who wants to start? Oh, Shadow wants to start. Go for it, sir.
As you guys already have heard, even Connell mentioned it before, I have absolutely no qualms of hitting that damage dial and turning it up, because I will not have my bosses die in the first round. I just won't do it. Oftentimes my big bad guys at the end, they don't have hit points. They have X number of turns they're going to survive, period. And then after a certain point, then I'll start, keeping track of damage. A lot of video games do the same thing. You cannot hurt them. I was playing Gauntlet with my son and his friends the other day, and this big boss was only damageable when certain conditions were met within, the screen. If his life meter wouldn't even show up until certain things happen. So you can just swing at him and nothing's going to happen. You can hit, you can think you're doing damage, but he's not taking any until later. Now I'll return it back to you and you can just go. I just wanted to remind you. Want me to? Okay. Disruption.
Yeah, go for it.
What did you mean by disruption again?
So disruption, we can go ahead and do the three-parter, and I'll ask everyone the same three-parter. So disruption is probably the most deadly dial a GM has in their scabbard of tools, so to say. Disruptions are events that affect players or enemies, and they're typically environmental, so to say. Because the environment doesn't obey rules. The environment just is. It's also typically rather large, and it's larger than any threat on the board. So, for example, a disruption might be something like gale force winds or forcing the players away. Other disruptions are like falling timbers or logs and rubble, drop upon the area, making it exceptionally deadly to, those who don't maneuver. Epic cataclysms also come to mind for the disruption dial. A tumbling sky ship capsizes while flying. Suddenly, your environment is now the most dangerous thing because you're getting thrown off the sky ship. So that's what disruptions are. Like, it might be mid-combat, might be mid-encounter, and then suddenly something horrific happens.
Well, one disruption I almost always use in my campaigns is war. And it ends up disrupting all kinds of different things, from the supply of goods and services to food and things like that. Otherwise, it's usually... Do you guys remember White Plume Mountain? The module? No? Nobody here? Wow. That's a classic.
No, I didn't.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's basically like a kind of like a volcano that you go into a dungeon, and you're going after 3 specific artifact weapons, including Black Razor, which you probably have all heard of. It's basically TSR's version of Stormbringer. You hit somebody with it, you kill them, it sucks their soul, and you get their hit points, for a temporary amount of time. Blah blah blah. But each room of that dungeon, not each room, but each room that has the artifact has some sort of thing in it, whether it's steaming hot water that kept at bay in a huge bubble, and if you pierce that bubble, you're all going to die from boiling hot water, to having to jump across these wooden platforms, and underneath the platforms is basically a river of lava, so you have to tread lightly in every situation. I'll do things like that a lot, where the environment doesn't always necessarily, it's full of poison gas, but if you do something, then something's obviously going to happen, like an avalanche, or the steaming hot water will fill the room, or something like that. I give them, a hint that this effect will happen, and that will basically force them to act and behave a certain way. Just like in Traveler, in starships, you don't usually start firing off your rocket launchers and your high-powered lasers. They usually use, rubber bullets and swords and stun rays and things like that, so you don't blow up the ship. But of course, some jackass will, bring grenades to the battle, thinking that's a good idea. You throw the grenades, and suddenly you guys are all stuck in space. I tend to, like I said, leave it, as a potential, as opposed to a guarantee that this is happening in this area. Like the like I said before, the room filled with poison gas. If you go in there, you got to make saves. If you fail your saves, you're gonna die. That kind of thing. And as for duration, not so much. Unless it covers like the topic before, where you have to do something in a time limit. Otherwise, the only time I would use something like that is if, like, a lich or a powerful magic user, something like that, hits you with some effect that would do something like that. Otherwise, it's kind of pretty straightforward until, like I said, you start dealing with more powerful adversaries that can basically metagame your combat and do things that prevent you from doing what you would normally do as their defense. And there's, obviously there's a few monsters out there that do things like that as well.
Absolutely. Let's see here. I'm going to move over to Kai next. So damage is obviously the easiest thing we can adjust. But disruptions are one of the most dangerous things. Do you tend to use these things, or, can you provide examples of when it's appropriate to adjust damage or throw disruptions at players?
I'm going to admit that I will crib from. I know most of us hate this idea that online gaming is like a terrible, horrible sin, but I will tell you one thing. Those encounters are actually kind of hilarious and fun, and they get your players involved really well. So steal fucking wantonly from everything. And yes, I will use things like if they're wasting time, I will go, well, I will have a little hidden little detail saying if you don't kill them in 10 rounds, there's enrage timer hits. They're going to deal more damage. Or I am going to use things like the environment changes. If you at a certain a certain point, if you're not kicking enough ass, or you're just not doing enough, you're fiddling about, I'm going to do the ground dropping away. I'm going to have add-ons spawn into the fight. I'm going to disrupt, I'm going to throw an environmental problem in there, and that's going to, and I will just, if you don't do your job right, I will throw a lot of things, but I will also reward people for going, if you can handle these challenges, go for it. It's one of those things where if I'm up in difficulty, I'm going to improve the reward too. So there's going to be pain and punishment, but you're going to get something out of it. So work harder or die. That's what it comes down to.
Okay. All right, I'm going to move over to Connell next. So, damage, obviously, easy to adjust, but disruptions, these always seem to be the tricky things. You're muted, sir.
Yeah, I muted myself so I wouldn't, be pain in the
smart
ass,
ass?
but it's well, yeah, mainly that. So I'm gonna be a smart ass tonight. Well, I have done, like I said earlier, and Shell's brought up, adding extra zeros to hit points if I think that the counter is going way, way too easier than what it should go. Damage wise, I've never really messed with the creature's weapons per se, but I have given creature spells that were not on their spell list, like cancellation. Which is a 5th edition spell that cancels spells. It's somebody casts Fireball, cancel. But no, I want Fireball. So I'll do things like that. And when it comes to environment, I will set my phone to the side, set a timer for like, I don't know, 3 or 4 minutes. And if they're fighting in a place that's literally on fire, the building is on fire, then when the alarm goes off, then there's just no escape for them. Like witches. It's what you do with witches. You burn witches. But that's neither here nor there. So yeah, I will use the environment like the burning building or the quicksand in certain circumstances. But other than that, I basically let them be their own distractions. Because you will, every once in a while you have that character who says, "Ooh, look at that pretty book over there. I want." Mid combat or right before combat, they separate themselves away from the party because they want to collect magical ingredients for their wizzy, or they're a book collector. Yes, Amanda, I'm talking about you when James shows you this video, and they separate themselves from the party, and that's a good time to have something spring up. For example, Foxglove in first book, Foxglove, where's it the second? No, it's the second part of the first book. Foxglove's mansion, the haunted mansion that has all kinds of its own weird haunts. And I will just kind of key it up where people see things are not really there because it's a haunted house. And I had one player once try to jump out of a 3rd-story window over into a cliff because he saw his mother dying in his arms and it drove him to insanity. So I'll fuck with my players that way as long as the scenario fits. If they're like having a fight in the middle of the woods, I mean, other than throwing the crits and fail deck into your campaign, I don't tinker around with it too much. But although if you do play Pathfinder, I do recommend DMs to pick up that deck of cards, 2 deck of cards, crit fails and crit succeeds, I think they're called.
Crit hit and crit fail.
Yeah.
You can also make your own.
Yeah, you can. I think it's just easier just to go that route.
It's a convenience factor.
But no, I just basically let my players be their own undoing because they do it so damn well.
They do tend to. Baron G-Rock, damage and disruption dials. Do you like to play with those settings quite often?
Well, when I actually ran a Pathfinder 2nd ed game, the Age of Ashes adventure path, the first big thing that the group comes on is a fire method inside of a building, and in it there is actual smoke inhalation rules. I almost lost the whole party due to that. So sometimes I'll do that. The other times to maybe ramp it up. Let's say they're hacking and slashing through. Let's say you're doing like a boss fight and you've got his minions there and they're hacking and slashing through them. They may have, potions of rage. They may also have, where he'll cast off a scroll or something like that, where, it'll, imbue giant strength on them to, because usually those guys that are melee, they're going to do more damage. Even sometimes, I've actually had where special made artifacts that I've made where they've taken, the boss is fighting them and everything else he's losing. And all of a sudden, he takes this artifact and smashes it into his chest, and it becomes embedded. And now he has DR, except against cold iron. Oh, guess what? Guess what? The players don't have anything that's cold iron. So I mean, and yes, they are still going to wind up overcoming it because it's usually like a 5, but it will also ramp up that. There's pretty much with a lot of the gaming systems, you can pretty much do anything you want with the magic. And you can make it to where there's this ancient artifact that maybe doesn't quite fit the rules of the world. Well, you know what? Artifacts kind of do what they want to do. Even after the fact, they may pick up this sword that may just start talking to them. Who knows? It's a lot of different stuff that, as a GM, you have everything available to you. You can tweak anything for any situation. Whether you want to tweak it up or you want to tweak it down. All of a sudden, the archers makes a roll, sees that there's these bags of rocks that are hanging, boulders that are hanging. Oh, right over where he's at. They fire an arrow, they splice the cord, and it falls on top of the big bag. That is, it may wind up being kind of anticlimactic for some people. It might be the fighter might get mad just for the simple fact of, I wanted to kill him. You took my boom splatter. That type of thing. Yes, that is a reference from a game that Jade has been in. But it's one of those types of things where you can, as the GM, arbiter, the table master, whatever you want to, the storyteller, whatever term you want to use, you have things that you can do, even if it's just off the top of your head. If they ask you, well, how did that happen? It goes, okay, well, roll the appropriate knowledge. You have no idea how this thing was made or brought into existence. You didn't even know that it was something that's around. But unfortunately, upon death, it disintegrates, and you are unfortunately not able to glean anything extra off. You could, some players are okay with that. Some players do get mad because they want to know how to do that themselves. And knowledge, old knowledge is sometimes locked away. So, I mean, that's typically how I will ramp stuff up. Another way is that I've actually had the enemies where if it draws blood, every time that it attacks, it draws blood or hits, it will start gaining either to attack or to damage. Typically, like, hit this person. Next time around, it has basically a charge. It has a
bloodlust
until expended. It'll gain +1 damage. Next time it hits, it may gain a +1 to attack. So you can kind of stagger it so it's not like you're stacking damage hard, but you can stagger it to where it is stacking the 2 hit into damage to where the players are like, well, we got to put this guy down because he's hitting harder and harder every single time. And sometimes that's all they need to, and it's great when you do not have a party that likes to focus fight, especially if there's, if let's say you got 2 skeletons on either side and they're engaged, those players that are engaged with more than likely can handle those skeletons. But the ghoul with this crazy sword, maybe we need to focus. The other members of the party need to focus on that to eliminate that threat. So, But that's typically how I do it.
I keep thinking about that damn creature that I chucked a couple arrows at, and because of its own magical abilities, it was able to chuck those arrows fucking back.
That was quite the disruption to your event. I'm going to push it over to Bruce next, and then I will give my thoughts on how to use damage and disruption dials.
I don't really use I don't really use those dials for disruption and damage, in my opinion. I I will set up an event and I start working on that, and I might have the sort of Damocles, but I don't typically go for huge distractions. I already have enough things that the players have to focus on right now. They have War with the Giants. They've got to wrap up. Like this next campaign night, we're gonna start off the campaign with the aftermath of them relighting a forge in a large citadel stocked with giants. And as long as their main nemesis remains alive, he's going to keep sending giants to their location to give them hell. And I don't really worry about distraction or damage dials. I could do something to where I had like, gas is filling the room every other round you're losing a con point. And they have to figure out how to escape the room or how to stop the gas from affecting them. And that would be something that you could do, but I typically don't do that. The worst thing I will do is I will take a trap. My favorite thing in this world for gaming is traps.
Mm-hmm.
I have talk like Barry Manilow for a moment. I have a thing for traps. I love having the party discover traps, and I love the rogue in said party to panic his little butthole to the size of a pinhole. I want him to get so freaked out over all the stuff that Rube Goldberg has stuffed on this location. And I want the party to figure it out. I want them to have that. And that's probably the only time you're going to have me give the party any leeway is when they've discovered a trap and they realize the payment if you fail this trap, if you fail to disarm it or fail to bypass it, whatever the mechanism touches, it will kill. And just letting the party sit back from that, a well orchestrated trap, a well designed trap. I always go back to the basics. Grim tooth traps are fantastic, and with so many moving parts, and you can have a party of thieves as a DM. You could have a party of thieves or rogues, and they specialize in this stuff, but they get to this trap and like fuck. And that's what you want, kids. That's the you give them how it operates and let them figure it out. Like I used to have this guy in my group, Mike. Mike was a former engineer for Caterpillar, and I let him play with traps a little bit, and he saw that I was a little deviant dungeon master whenever it came to dealing with electricity and metal plates, and he still hates me. He's not been at my game since that night. I mean, maybe it's the fact that I also told his daughter to stop sleeping right in front of the refrigerator. There are people fatter than you that want to eat, and that might be part of that too. But I don't like the damage or the ticker so much as I love. Just let the players envision what happens if things go wrong. Let them play with that in their head. You'll have the players jumping to more conclusions than an angry ex-girlfriend who was a mental long jump conclusion finalist. You know what I mean when I say that.
I'm not saying a word.
I just want you to have fun with it. And as a DM, I want to have fun with it too. That's why I crank up the difficulty. I'm not trying to kill my party off, but I do want them to make good decisions. I'm not trying to lead them by the nose. They have multiple ways to success or bypassing it, whatever it may be. But I want them to I don't want to just have a die roll be the solution. Oh, I rolled a 27. Do I disable it? What was your perception roll? Okay, here's the item itself. You see all these chests stacked together, and there's little springs between them. How do you want to look at this? I mean, how do you want to position your character? Do you want to have yourself kind of eyeballing it to where you're standing about 2 or 3 foot away? Let me draw this out for you and let you position the character around the stack of chests where the trap is at. Let me know. Oh yeah, and some of the chests are trapped too. And just give them something to where they can see their body exploding into beef stroganoff. That's just give them that. They exploded.
Well, maybe use a ballista.
You can't sneak attack with a ballista. Okay, that's all I got to say.
Okay. So here's how I tend to use the dials for damage and disruption. So I already kind of alluded to it at the beginning. If my demons or whatever has been missing all night, or just their 1d6 hit hasn't been hitting very hard, they might just decide to grab the fighter's sword from them, smash it against the rocks. One, that's taking something pretty crucial from the fighter, and two, breaking it. Yes, I know I'm going to probably get some hate from Kai on that one, but then he's turning that into a weapon that's going to do far, far more gruesome wounds. So that's how I ramp up the damage. I don't necessarily increase the damage die. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. But I'll add extra effects to it. I'll add like a bleed effect. It's like, okay, I've hit you for 5 bleed. You will bleed 5 damage every single round until a healer tends to your wounds. The other dial I like to use, and this is the disruption dial. It was pointed out in chat, you don't want to use the environmental effects all the time, and that's correct. You don't want to use the environmental effects all the time, because then your players will just expect it and get bored of it. But you can do other things. You can allude to other things. The environmental effects can be on that timer that we talked about before. So I might say, the ground trembles, and during this encounter, you feel the ground trembling, and you see the smoke rising from the volcano in the distance. You're not sure when, but you know an eruption's on the way. But now you have to fight against the hordes of undead that are before you. So they either have to fight their way through, try to run away, and if they don't make it, if the timer elapses while they're still brute forcing their way, then a wave of fire and poisonous gases might sweep over them, and now they're in a rush. Now they have to either continue fighting until they fall over dead, or they have to run. So my disruption tactics for the extreme side of things are to force my players to move forward, to just move on. Sometimes I might throw mild disruptions, like they might be fighting avian creatures. The avians can fly, obviously, but they also might be fighting on cliff sides. So now they have to deal with gale force winds, or winds that and precarious positioning of footing. That's another type of disruption, because now they can't use their full movement in the mechanically speaking method. Another disruption might be a foe noticing that the board is loose, beneath his foot. He slams his foot down, brings the board up as a temporary shield, and gains cover bonus. This does two things. It increases the threat capability of the foe, because it shows that they are cunning and willing to use their environment to their advantage, something that I'm hoping my players will pick up on and be able to do later on. The very last dial that I touch is duration. This one, it affects the timer. You can either add more time or take away more time, as the case may be. Mild duration control might be like, oh, you're going to trek through the night. Okay, the night's going to grow freezing cold. Are you prepared for that? Other methods might be, I might put a threat timer on the proceedings of a banquet. You know that something's going to happen during the banquet. It's an encounter, after all. Something's going to happen, but you're there to make negotiations. What's the damage? The damage is going to be reputation. You might suffer reputation damage. Disruptions might be assassins at the banquet to kill the target before you're able to make said arrangements. These are all different types of dials and controls we as game masters can use to make more meaningful encounters. And that to me is the real challenge, is making an encounter that's meaningful to the overall campaign or story, for some that would rather that word. I would rather that word. But all of this kind of boils down to how you set up and build your encounters. You need them to have some inherent danger. You also need them to have kind of an energy or a flow to get from point A to point B. And that flow shouldn't be interrupted. It should be reinforced. So yes, the disruption, while it might be perceived as interruptive, it's forcing the players to move, to do something, to interact. But you also have to fill your space with wonder. Now, this is something we might have to get to at another time. We've got about 20 minutes left. And the wonder is your environment. So I don't know. I'm going to pass it to the rest of the group. Is this something we want to continue next week, or do we want to wrap up encounters tonight?
I think it's worthy of at least a one go around.
Okay.
I definitely have thoughts on it.
Okay. All right, then let's go ahead and hit the wonder button. How do you build wondrous encounter spaces? These spaces are the limited area in which your encounter takes place. It could be a ballroom, it could be a cave, it could be a cliffside, or a seaside cliff where the cliffs rise above you and the water's off to your side, and you've got narrow lanes of movement. So yeah, let's go ahead and dive into it. Who would like to start?
I'll start.
No show of hands. Oh yeah, go for it.
Well, yeah. And the thing is that we actually had one thing in a campaign that I have always paid homage to in every campaign. Something happened in our first campaign. It was flavor text. As you're walking through, on the road, you come across a tree that's at a Y in the road, and there's a black orc arrow stuck in the tree. It never fails. There's a 20-minute discussion about the black orc arrow stuck in the tree that has nothing to do with anything except for flavor text. That's all it is. Because when they inspect it, it's been grown, the trees grow around it. It's not something that is necessarily, that was just happened just there. But it does actually tell you a little bit of, well, there was orcs in this area at one time. So, and that actually starts getting them wondering, well, did the orcs get win because we're on our way here and this is supposed to go into a human town? So is the issue we're coming across going to be orcs? Is it going to be goblins? Is it going to be any type of greenskins, or is it going to be something completely different? It starts getting them wondering and opens up the wonderment that you're talking about of what they're going to come into. And it also sets that anticipation, because once the wonder is there, then that The anticipation starts to really build, and that's the thing is that it is it's flavor text, but you can use even flavor text to help move the story along, to get the players wondering what's going to be happening. It doesn't have to be, they walk up and, oh, look, there's this great big temple to this old god, and you've got to figure out a way to get in and everything else. And but it could be as simple as a black orc arrow stuck in a tree.
Connell, do you set the scene, and how do you build your encounter space?
My counter space for the wonders of the game. You're in a shop. Your players go to the shop. They have no idea what kind of shop this is, but this is a shop. The shop seems to have a few magical items, some oddities that they have left or right, like a hand in a jar that has an eyeball sitting in it. Why would that jar have a hand and eyeball in it? And they start talking to the shop owner, and the shop owner, they end up making some kind of deal of it. But right as they close the deal and shake the shop owner's hand, there's a quick flash of silver, or some kind of flash in his eye that doesn't seem right, but makes you want to go back and it's like to the rest of the party. It's like, hey, did you know anything weird about that shopkeeper? You mean Max? He's like, no. Why? I'm like, just curious. Such an odd guy. He's like, yeah, well, it's a gnome. What do you expect? They're all kind of weird. And I just build in little things like that into my campaign that eventually, as the campaign goes on, more and more of the party have realized that there's something not right about, not that there's anything wrong, but there's nothing right. Something's not right about this NPC, that he's really, an ancient silver dragon that's using his hoard to hoard. His hoard, that's a whole different business. That is a stripper guild. Using his hoard to finance his business and, and stuff like that. And that's just something I throw into my campaign that I picked up from somebody else. That was a really good idea. That's, small stuff like that.
You're muted.
Yep, I see that now. Thank you. All right, Kai, paint me a picture. How do you build your encounter space?
I usually have a good idea what the terrain or the environment is. I'll try to paint it out before they get into the encounter. Possibly give them a day, even a day in character to think about what they're about to do, and give them enough details that they get a sense of just the environment they're going to be in. It can be wondrous. I know the wonder of congratulations. You're now walking through a horrible, plague-filled, completely rotten village. It's all it all based on what environment you're about to go running around in. It could be something nice. It could be something elegant, something wondrous and majestic of the environment, or simply you're in a giant volcano. They're ancient ruins. What do you expect? Mind you, when I'm actually GMing, it's much, much more better than that. But
More better.
Hey, look, it's late. We're past my 9:30 off time. So, look, it's just going to be simply. I will go into wonderful detail on things that I hopefully am going to keying you into, but I'm not going to, it's. Look, if you can't describe the environment you're in, you're in the wrong hobby. I learned to paint, I learned to art, learn architecture, learn everything you can. Look outside a window and go, how would you describe a highway? that's interesting. And if you can't describe a highway in an interesting manner, if you can't describe a grocery store in an interesting manner, you're not going to do anything actually worthwhile. You might as well just draw it out on a map and go, here is your 5x5 stone square room. There is nothing of interest here. There might be some moss. Don't ask me much about the moss. It's kind of rough. But if you can actually go into a room and describe it in an interesting manner, describe the dam, describe a water wheel in an interesting manner, you got to actually be observant enough to be able to relay it. Because I could draw for you a very boring blueprint, and it will be blueprint boring. It will be straight edges and congratulations. You could probably build this structure, and it will be fine, whatever. But that won't provide any interest into it. But if you go into it and go, well, yeah, there's marble floor, there's marble columns on the side with gold and quartz running through them, and the floors are all polished. Some of your players can go, floors are polished, huh? Okay, I can work with that. You can go with tapestries on the wall. Players are going to go, I can work with tapestries. There's water running. I can work with water. Your players can start figuring out things. Stained glass. They might be able to figure out, I can do something with that window. And it's but if you just go, boring window, it has boring storm shutters, wood walls, stone room. It is a standardized template that would make, most Japanese architects feel proud about how very standardized you are, how wonderful. It is approximately 5 tatami mats wide and 6 tatami mats big and long. Congratulations, you are a standardized room. Fantastic. But nobody wants to hear that shit. They all want to have an interesting, cool environment. Or so they can kind of go, okay, maybe can I go run up that brownstone staircase? Yeah. Can I use that as a high ground to help funnel people up into where I'm at? Yes, you can. But if you don't give them that information, or you make it worth boring, it's just a straight, stay on the street. It's a flat street. There's no bank, there's something to work with. You're probably not going to do anything cool. They're not going to work. All they're going to do is just walk down a fucking road and stab shit. Down the hallway and stab shit. Because you provided them nothing to work with. They're not going to do anything with it. But the moment you go there's rigging, there's broken, there's overhangs, the players will start to want to do more. The encounter becomes more alive, more interesting. And unfortunately, that's a detail that most GMs are just is a dark hallway. Deal with dark hallway. There's no cover in dark hallway. Is there anything? No. Now do what I say or I break your hands. Okay, cool. Fantastic.
What kind of DM do you have?
Have you ever... I had not dealt with people, but... Well, no. I've had GMs who are do the adventure or I fucking punish you because you've gotten out of line. And you just deal with shit GMs. If you deal with... Look, I was a teenager once. We weren't all fucking guys in our 40s. We weren't all people who fucking are masters. We were all idiots who started out going, hi, Mom let me out of the house and I need to be done with gaming by 8 so I can get a ride home. Because, we were all 14 once. We were all 12. We weren't, and not all of us had the luck and benevolence of having a GM who knew what they were doing to give us beautiful adventures, and most of us had pocket change for our budgets, so we couldn't go out and buy those amazing modules that were out of print, and nobody really wanted to run Menzo Baranzan today, and so early storytelling, and because we were 14-year-old shitheads who have no idea what we're doing, the greatest book we've ever read is an R.A. Salvatore novel. Ew. Or, hey, I read The Hobbit once. I think I know how to describe shit, but I only read it once for a book report, and I don't know what I'm doing. I know that we now, as, old fuckers, yeah, we have the benefit of going, oh my God, we're all amazing. We've read so much. We can tell We can describe so much, but that new player, they haven't done it. They don't have the life experience to draw upon. How many of you were at 12 were like, yeah, I know how to describe Niagara Falls in an interesting manner? Okay. Most of us, when we were young, like, big falls, lots of water, very loud, mist. There's some rocks in the water.
You could ride down it in a barrel.
Oh, yeah, and die. But now that some of us are older, we might be able to go, oh, yeah, the river splits. There's several rocks. The water's churning, There's a wreck. There's an old wreck on that. There's, jagged rocks at the bottom. There's idiots in a cruise on a cruise ship in raincoats at the bottom. You could have a lot of fun with it. But we had that because we're old. But you got to remember, if you don't give your players fuel, they're not going to do anything with it. I mean, players need that description. You got to give them to them. You get that wonder. You just got to be able to be slightly more capable and more creative than I follow the module. Module says old farmhouse. Old. Wood very weak due to age. You should probably smash wood if you want to get through wall fat. No, god damn it. Learn how to describe shit. You don't need to be Tolkien. You don't need to be fucking or Robert Jordan, where it's like that teacup with the crack in it. That's important in book 7. You don't need that shit. But you need to be able to do more than Skeleton King describes your bullshit and goes, and you just kind of just drool on yourself because of how little he's giving you to work with. There you go.
Okay. Shadow, how do you build your encounter spaces?
Well, right off the bat, most of my fantasy worlds are what a lot of you would describe probably as fairy tale worlds, where the people and the societies are very young and innocent. Not necessarily the people are all, teenagers or something like that, but they're young kingdoms. The world is new. So everything that they see that has to do with magic and strange creatures is treated as a first-time occurrence or a first-time appearance or something that's only spoken of in legends until the big war comes, which is also something that happens or has happened in my last 3 campaigns in Fantasy Worlds with completely different groups of players and completely different worlds because I wanted to explore it differently. One campaign I had that was really interesting for my players, I denied them their clerical ability to turn undead. Not because they couldn't do it, but because no one had encountered undead in 1,000 years, so no one actually knew that it was like a thing that they could do. Until the very first time someone had pulled out a holy relic that was basically a banner, a big banner pole with a holy symbol on it, and they were marching into combat, and they realized that the undead were being turned by it. And then they did a little reading and research, and they realized through the ancient stories that, putting your holy symbol forward and invoking your god, the god of goodness and what have you, would actually turn the undead. The undead were used to getting away with, just stomping through towns and cities, and then they came to the one area where the characters were, and they pulled out their secret weapon, and suddenly they were just, filled with this, reverence for the priestly professions, and those people became, big damn heroes using their goodness and light and all that. The same with, anytime somebody runs into a magic user or a wizard or something like that, they're treated with this reverence because it's not an everyday thing. When Gandalf walked through the Shire, it was a big deal because, that's only something out of legend. And I reiterate those kinds of feelings. If a player's playing a magic user, everybody is just, they're 1 in 100 to 1 in 1,000, humans or elves or whatever. Will there ever be a wizard out in public? They're usually locked away in their towers, so they get, a bit of fanfare. They get, treated better because it's a wonderful occurrence that, you've got someone who could use magic coming to our little, town, off the beaten track. So it must be a special occasion. And the same with all the magic that I use, because that's, I think, the basis of real wonder in fantasy games. It's the magic, whatever kind of magic it is. I let them know that that's a special thing. That doesn't just happen every day. Even in my magic heavy worlds, every kind of magic is kind of a little bit different and a little bit more uncommon than the last, continual light. This one's different, and I try to, throw that out to the players that, magic is a big deal. It's a game changer. No matter where you go, it should be treated with respect, but also wonder, because you never know what you're actually going to get. You see Bruce tapping his fingers there. You're up next, buddy.
Mike?
You muted again.
What was your question for me? Because I don't know if you asked me the same question as the other four gentlemen here, if I could really throw a varied response. That's the negative part about the Ryan Robbins with 5 operators in here. But
operators?
And Mike's muted.
You're muted, Jade.
Sorry.
Yep, there it is again. So my question was about building a sense of wonder through encounter space. You don't necessarily have to build the wonder through encounter space, but how do you set up your encounter space in a way that your players can explore your world, whether it's a combat encounter or a role play encounter?
I typically will. I run hex crawls, and so when I start the game, I start with descriptors of what the immediate environment is around them, how far they can see, what type of foliage is around. Hello, James L. I want to impart to them if they feel like if it's a little bit way too hot today, because that's one thing that is a factor down here. This time of year, we're going to get about 100 days over 100 degrees. And we're still on track for that with day 26 or 22, I think. But I need to try to immerse them in that setting to where they're in a poor area that has been salted by previous invasions. And I need them to understand there's not much but scrub, the occasional mesquite tree, very little wild wheat growing around here, not a whole lot of real vegetation, not really good growing soil. You're going to have a druid, a coven of hags, or somebody come here and massage the environment to become fertile again. And I want them to be aware of that, because this is the land that their characters grew up in, and they don't know that. These are like 5 to 8 people sitting around a virtual table, sometimes my personal table, in a game where they've barely known each other for 2 years, and they sure as hell didn't go through adolescence together. So I have to shovel this into them, kind of spoon feed it bit by bit, and I don't like giving them whole paragraphs of flavor text. I prefer giving them like 3 or 4 facts, pause, wait for input. I want a conversation. I want them to bounce ideas off of me, and either I can say, yeah, you have this, or no, you don't really think that'd be a good idea to head in that direction, because over there you've had the druid say there are boule trails in that area. Let's not go there and lose all of our horses. I want the players to interact with me more than I have to describe it. When I build my areas of wonder, I don't really get to the wonders part for the first maybe 6 to 10 interactions. Now, when they discovered a cavern that was a magical nexus of ley lines. I need the party to start feeling like there's something amiss. Like the casters, I will let them know your body hairs are staying on edge. You feel electrified. Your ion stone is going around your head at a higher RPM. And then you get into the cave, and instead of the cave getting dark, the cave gets brighter the further down you go. And not only do you have that electrified feeling to you, you also note that your skin is getting warmer, like you're bursting with a fever or something's wrong with you because you're a sorcerer and you've just got weird blood that way. And once they get down in the room itself, I just described to them the sound of these various chimes or alien sounds that are echoing around the rock and quartz around them. They can see the visual beams of mana and ley line energy, 3 foot flexing and warping, little veins coursing along the white muscles of what could be some sort of magical creature that disappears off in the walls. Maybe you're just an infinitesimal creature within the bloodstream, a virus looking at the internals. And I try to give them this small dwarf feeling. When I need it to be a wondrous environment, I want to act like it's being read to them by some great actor like Morgan Freeman, or I want them to feel like they're encountering the Harry Potter environments for the first time in person. I need them to have that sense of wonder, but I don't do it like everybody else. I want to give 3 or 4 big details about it. Wait, what are you doing? Interact with players, let them continue, let them retreat. And as I get them to go further in, I don't want to bombard them with this huge volumes of information. I need to drip feed it to them because I want them to interact with it every foot they step through the corridor. I want them to be able to get their hands on it. I want them to be able to get the oily feeling of the shale on their hands and realize that this area is a future drilling zone. I need them to have that mentality. I need them to have that level of interaction. And once I've made my mushroom stamp upon their delicate, fragile selves, let them go about their room, let them experiment with a few cantrips or spells or play with the ley line magic. Let them do that. Let them experience this. Because they're not going to be hanging out in this corridor the rest of their life. This is going to be probably 3 or 4 times in their life they're going to be here. And not for a very long period of time. So you as a cleric, you might want to try your ability to shout really loud once or twice until you realize you could collapse a cavern on top of us.
Okay.
Is that a good enough?
Yeah, no, that's perfect. I find often that painting in vague, broad strokes, my scenes, tends to work better early on, and then letting my players fill in the minutia of detail by interacting with the scene that I have set for them. If they're in a place of, let's say, the Abyss, in the Midnight Isles, I might paint a scene of, this rather drab cityscape of pain and misery. And if they get into an encounter on the streets, most of the buildings are run down, and are run by demons. So they might get into a fight with a demon, but then they have the entire. I've already painted the scene, and then they can kind of go, well, is there anything we might be able to do to throw off suspicion or to escape? I'm like, oh yeah, there might be a few alleyways here or there dotted around. Maybe perception roll or something. And that'll help. If they're asking questions about the encounter space, I've painted it vaguely enough to let them kind of guide where it's going to go next. Like I might paint a library scene where it's 3 stories of books, and to get to each story, there's a central staircase, that spiral staircase that goes up and down, and you're on the 3rd floor. Well, do we know what we're looking for? Yeah, you know what you're looking for. Okay, can we find a directory? Yeah, you can find a directory. There, I painted the picture of the library and give them the fact that it's 3 stories tall. But then they are asking the questions of, well, we're looking for this one thing. Do we know how to find it? Well, yes. You for any of the scholars in the group, you know how to search a library. You know where the index is to find books. So by painting just the broad picture, it will naturally, or it should naturally, get the players involved by asking questions. But your locations need to be fantastical or wonderful enough to kind of let them imagine the space. Now, I could, have a sterile ship or a spacefaring vessel that, the corridors are stainless steel as far as the eye can see, with bulkheads every 20 meters. They might ask, is there any Jeffries tube access? Because, they may have watched too much Star Trek, But, oh, yeah, there's Jeffrey tube access. Are there, individual corridors or rooms attached? Yeah, there's a few of those. But if I paint, like I said, if I paint a general enough picture, I let my players fill in the rest. But I do also have to give some sense of wonder, like that same sterile corridor scene. They might see one light blinking on and off in what seems to be a pattern. They might go investigate the light and realize it might be Morse code or something. Or I might fill the area with an ominous sound because the ship has been invaded. But I have to do something to paint the encounter space in such a way to make it an encounter, not just another room. With that, we have gone 2 hours, 11 minutes and counting. I think that's probably a decent wrapping up point.
Yeah,
I agree with that. I'll get everybody's links in the chat or in the video description after we are finito. Chimerian, what would you like to say as a closing statement for your end?
Honestly, I had something, but I've gotten tired and I forgot it.
Is it the same thing that's in the private chat?
Oh, yeah, that is. But
Ooh.
yeah, thanks
Notes, they're important.
Well, hey, remember I said 9:30 is when I start turning off, and we're now way past that. But no, the last thing I want to have on encounters really comes down to is we always think about them as simply being this little thing you do, over, hey, combat rounds are 6 seconds. My awesome encounter lasts maybe 3 minutes of of game time, and real time it's like 30 minutes to 2 hours. That's the entirety of my focus and my thing, and then I go on to my next encounter on the roller coaster of fun and joy. But perhaps you could start looking at your encounter being something that's more like the course of 2 to 3 days or weeks or months, and think about the situation you would get. The encounter doesn't really end. As you start looking at the idea of a kingmaker, or if you're the head of an organization, a unit, a ship, something like that, your problems don't go away when the initiative counter ends. That encounter problem might be lingering for quite some time, and you may not even resolve it in one section. It could still be this lingering, looming thing. You start to blend. Some of the line blends into what could be considered a campaign almost, or several sessions. But being in charge of a fort, you might find yourself going, okay, the situation is the encounter is defend the fort. How do you defend it? You start looking at how to solve the problem. Work every detail. What resources do you have? What people do you have? Of course, you're understaffed. We're GMs. We fuck you and we fuck your personnel rate. You don't have them. You don't have enough material. You don't have shit. You need to start thinking. You turn on that A-team theme. Turn on MacGyver. Look through the inventory, and if your GM doesn't give you an inventory to work with, beat him. Beat your GM until they give you an inventory list of what you got to work with. And if your GM doesn't give you enough parts, go out and make your own parts. This is why your players need to be smart. This is why your players need to be skilled. This is why your players need to have ideas what to do. You need to give them the tools that they need to be able to work at, or they will make your own tools. And if you start whining like a little goddamn spoiled cunt about how the fact that my players are all being special and they're asking for too much, and fuck off. Just let them goddamn work. Let them solve the problem. You gave them a shitty situation. You gave them a shitty problem. You created a shitty encounter for them, and let them work. If they get out of your fucking little roller coaster ride of joy so if you said let them. So when your little black orc or whatever fucking gobbo horde shows up to go fucking raid them, let the party have their fun. Let them reward them for looking at the encounter. Because if you've done your job right, they've had maybe a month or two to think about how to build up, how to think, how to repair, how to plan their get out of hell escape plan. If shit goes to fucking hell in a handbasket, they better have a way out. So if you create a situation where they have no way out, fuck you. You're a bad GM, and all you're doing is hoping for an Alamo last stand murder, and everyone's a dead corpse. Congratulations, you've done a wonderful job being a fucking great GM. But if you don't give your players any tools, you don't give them any prodding, you don't give them any help, and they all just go, well, we're all going to die now. Well, congratulations, you're all going to die now. But no. So the problem might take 2-3 months. It might take multiple situations. It's not an encounter that you can just go, well, you killed all 20 orcs and you've gotten the cake. Here's your XP reward. Congratulations, go have fun. And off to the next sing-song little world, a little small little bullshit song you're gonna play for them, and just have some realize that you're going to have some fun letting your players do more. Think about if they want to do more, let them have more. The problem is solved when they solve it. It might just take a while. That's all. I'm done.
Okay.
I love it when Kai says something and we all just sit there just trying to digest that information. You're wrapping your mouth around a quadruple cheeseburger with bacon and thick sliced tomatoes, and you're trying not to get all the juice on yourself. But Kai made such an impressive burger that you're going to be just a glutton, and you're going to let all the juices and all the stuff, the mustard's going to come off the side of your mouth because you're wrapping your mouth around Kai's burger, and it's so good.
Whoa!
That's enough to make you go
you want
vegan.
Kai's
You
meat
need
in your
to
mouth?
you really need to rephrase that because I can go vegan.
It's the old Carl's Jr.
mental morsel. And after
Can't hear you, Bruce.
After he gets done prepping this,
Bruce, can't hear you.
And we're just sitting there dumbfounded for 30 seconds trying to, holy shit, we're tying this all together like that guy. It's always sunny in Philadelphia.
He's always smoking crack in Philadelphia. What?
Thank you, Kai. That was great, my friend.
As you were saying, Jay, because you were muted.
No, I think that's a good point to end on this evening.
Kai's meat.
Yes, Kai's meat in people's mouths is a great place to stop.
St. Kai's Burger, home of the big sausage.
With special sauce.
I prefer the old Carl's Jr. Hardee's commercial where if you're not wearing it, you're not enjoying it.
Come on.
I remember that. Okay, with that, I would go around the horn, but I really just want to end on this high note that Kai left us. Thank you so much for showing up. We'll be here next Thursday to continue episode 35 of Table Breakers, discussing encounter design, environmental design, and
35?
38.
38.
If we're going back in time, I need to prepare.
I'll send
We know
Cher
all
over
about
to
time
your
travel.
house.
I need last week's lottery numbers.
Okay. We'll talk to you all later. See you on next Thursday evening. Thank you so much.